in Britain is too big and is growing, and what should be done about it? And we'll start with Richard.
Okay, do I acknowledge that that's the case? Absolutely, I acknowledge that's the case. I think the issue has not been one that is recent. It's been over the last 30, 40 years in the period that we've been told that the neoliberal project and the free market will fix absolutely everything. I think there are so many things that we can do to address this. And first is to simply make sure that our government is and our economy is seen to be serving us first and not itself. And we need our government to turn around and actually focus on the 99% of us who are the only vested interest they should really ever listen to. In terms of directly addressing it, I think there are things which we need to do regarding taxation. There's a huge amount of tax that is due, so we're not talking about raising tax, we're talking about collecting what is due. It's £120 billion by one estimate. That's the same as the NHS budget. At the same time that we should be having that money, successive governments have decided to cut the number of people working at HMRC by 44%. That is just plain mad and is a political decision. We need people working at HMRC who themselves will be people employed and paying tax, who will go out there and collect the tax that is due. The return on investment is ridiculously large. For every pound you spend on one of these people working for our benefit, they get somewhere between £19 and £97 back. So why aren't we doing it? That is a huge issue. It's something that we need to address. And really everything else in terms of public services and any issues around austerity and the need for it, or tax rises, comes back to that figure, £120 billion, which, okay, I'm not naive enough to think we'll get all of it, but we'll get a fair amount of it, and we have to have the political will to do that, and we simply have not got that at the moment.
Martin, to come to you next.
Just coming quickly back on that figure of 120 billion, I mean, I'm a supporter of the tax dodging bill campaign, and even they don't think there's that much coming back. We have tried in the last 5 years to recoup quite a lot from tax evasion and tax avoidance, doing deals with some of these tax havens like Switzerland and Liechtenstein to recoup money from them, which is good. But the question was really, is the gap between rich and poor too great? And the answer is clearly yes. And it's yes in global terms. I talked about one promise we managed to keep in government, which was about 0.7%. This question, I guess, was more about the UK. Another promise we managed to keep was to take everyone earning £10,000 or less out of income tax. Liberal Democrats would now like to push that further, up to some 12,500, so that everybody who is roughly full-time on the minimum wage pays no income tax. And that seems like a basic, pays no income tax, so that's like a basic thing, that if someone's on a minimum wage, you shouldn't then take more money away from them in taxation. But there's more we can do to make it fairer, and that actually does include, and this is something our Conservative coalition partners didn't sign up to, but it's something we would want to push, is to raise more money from those with the broadest shoulders. So that does mean taxing the wealthy more through closing some of the loopholes in capital gains tax, through the mansion tax, so that people with properties worth more than £2 million make a contribution to our society as well. And I think if we are to move towards a more equal society, which is what it says in my Liberal Democrat constitution I'm supposed to be committed to, then we have to use the tax system to equalise wealth in this country. Because I think there are lots of reports, like the Marmot report on health, for instance, which do show that inequality itself is not just bad for the people at the bottom of the heap, if you like, but it's bad for the whole of society. And so I'm absolutely committed to trying to achieve a more equal society.
Thank you. Christina.
Yes, undoubtedly there is a huge gap and a growing gap. It's been growing for actually quite a long time. One of the things that we're committed to in UKIP is making sure that no one who's earning the minimum wage will pay tax at all. because it seems rather stupid to be charging people taxation at one hand and then employing a lot of expensive people to decide that they can have benefits back with the other. So sensibly, take people who are earning minimum wage out of taxation altogether. There are other things, though, that I think will help. People who are on modest incomes, they're having a decent income, but they are very rapidly told that they are higher rate taxpayers. And that was introduced for people who were, at that time, very well paid by the average standard. That isn't the case any longer. So we're proposing that we will put in an intermediate tax band so that people aren't suddenly moving from 20% into the 40% band of taxation. That will help to smooth the line of taxation, perhaps encouraging people to pay their taxes rather than try to avoid them. We do not agree with big businesses avoiding their share of taxation. And unfortunately, Mr. Juncker, who is in charge of the EU at the moment, actually was helping some of the big businesses to make deals so that they could reduce their taxation when he was in fact in charge of Luxembourg. So you have to think about where is this coming from. The other thing we're saying here is that we will get rid of the bedroom tax. We don't think it's fair at all. We think it's quite iniquitous to try and say to people you can no longer have your home or you're going to have to pay more for it, especially when there is no provision in many cases for them to move to a suitable, smaller accommodation. And thirdly, we're going to scrap hospital car park charges. It seems again that that is taxing people who are sick. It's quite silly that people who pay tax, who are using the hospitals, should then have to pay tax again to visit relatives or themselves when they go to be treated for major illnesses or sicknesses. So those are some ways in which practically we think we can help to ease the burden on the lower paid. But there is definitely something in this country we need to redress. The gap between the people at the top and their multiples of the earnings of the people who are employed in their companies is huge and has grown enormously over the last 20 years. It's something that I think really needs to be looked at.
Thank you.
Well, Martin talked about a global context. I'm going to talk about an acutely Cheltenham context, because one of the things that I think is actually a running sore in Cheltenham, if I can possibly strike a nerve, is I think there is a real imbalance between rich and poor in our own town, and it strikes me as unacceptable that we have some of the poorest wards in the entire country, not just in Gloucestershire, but here in our town, and that's something which I think anybody who assumes that they should potentially be qualified to be the Member of Parliament ought to have a plan to tackle. So that's point one. Point two, insofar as there's an implicit allegation about what's happened in the last 5 years, I think it's very important to see the context of this. Back in 2010, the top rate of tax was 40%. It's now 45%. Back in 2010, people started paying tax at around £6,000, and Labour got rid of the 10% tax and made it 20% tax. The coalition, however, as Martin has indicated, say that no one should pay tax until up to £10,500. That's an important point. And other things which hit poor people more, things like fuel. Well, we've got rid of the fuel duty escalator, and also frozen things like council tax. So yes, it's absolutely right that there is an unacceptable gap, but the coalition has done things that I think we can be rightly proud of.
Yeah, like made the VAT 20%.
Well, hang on, I mean, I can deal with that point if necessary, but it is important to see it in context. Going forward, we have indicated, and in fact I think this is the same as UKIP, that we want to take people who are on minimum wage out of tax altogether, and I think that's a really important thing. But the final point I'll make is this. What did I say?
Use of tax.
Oh, forgive me, out of income tax, yeah. The final point I'll make is this. The best and crucial underpinning to try to arrest the divergence between rich and poor is to ensure that you have a strong economy, an economy that is generating jobs, that is generating tax revenue, so that we can do the things that we want to do on health and education, all those sorts of things, which are so important to giving people life chances and to ensure we have a fairer society.
Adam, you're going.
Yeah, the point from the audience is one I was going to raise. I mean, I'll just briefly talk about tax at the moment. I mean,
the threshold of income tax for people earning more don't pay income tax. Hasn't helped those people who are kind of below the threshold in the first place. It hasn't helped those people who aren't earning a wage as it is in the first place as well. Poverty is more absolute than that. The people I would have grown up on the council estate would have been hit harder by the VAT rise than they would have been benefited by this income tax threshold rise. Poverty in this country, inequality has just grown over the last 40 years, as Richard has said. The economy has grown, yet so has inequality at the same time. We've had a stronger economy, yet we've had wider inequality. The gap between the rich and the poor has grown as the economy has grown as well. So something clearly isn't working here. Our focus clearly isn't right. During a boom time, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. During a bust time, the rich carry on getting richer and the poor carry on getting poorer. We really need to actually have a look at what we're doing as a society in terms of actually cohesiveness, in terms of doing things together. You can't allow people to opt out of society and then expect individuals or charities to actually have to come in and pick up the pieces. It's absolutely fantastic that people do. The Cheltenham Food Bank being an example here. We're in a rich middle-class Regency town ostensibly, but food bank use keeps going up. The fact that there is a food bank is terrible in a way, but also fantastic because people are actually stepping in and helping those in need. But they're helping those people in need because society has left them behind. And that's a society where we don't mind the rich not paying their tax. It's a society where we don't mind big business having tax cuts and things like that. The rich have to pull their weight because they've benefited the most from our society, so it's only fair that they should be putting the most in. So the Green Party are very comfortable with saying that actually the top rate of tax should be higher, that the big businesses that make the biggest profit should be paying their way and they should not be avoiding tax. I think there are some big changes needed because I'm very worried that the main parties are offering up a road that just carries on with the economy growing and inequality growing.
Hard to disagree with anything that Adam has just said, maybe with the exception that it's hard to see one of the mainstream parties being able to address some of those issues. The key thing for me is fairness, and we have stepped away from fairness in so many ways. The recession bit hardest on those who are most vulnerable, and it will continue to do so if we have a Conservative-led government. Their proposals to cut, and to cut rapidly and deeply, I think are some of the scariest proposals that any party has proposed. And I know it's dressed up as necessary to equalise the deficit and all these things. I take a very simplistic